Okay, this is my first YouTube video on information that I think people might find useful and maybe surprised where you can find sources. Everybody's talking about learn this skill, that skill. Well, you know what? A lot of information is right under your nose and in places you don't expect. Some of you might recognize these books. These are the Laura Ingalls series. People probably are familiar with Little House on the Prairie that was on TV in the 70s and 80s. That is based on these books. This actually is a collection of stories from her actual life. And I would say if you didn't like the TV show or had something, or even if you did like it, but if you didn't like it, give these books a chance, because really picking them up for the first time and reading about this is there's a lot of good stories here and a lot of useful information, because a lot of these things are based on real life back in the 1800s. The first book is called Little House in the Big Woods, and it's when Laura is up to about 5 or 6 years old, living in Wisconsin. And I'm just going to show you some quick examples. Hope I don't get in trouble for copyright here. But page 9, it talks about smoking with illustrations, and it, even though it's in a narrative format, gives information how to smoke meat and what they used, and hickory, and even talks about the wood and using a tree. So that's kind of neat. Some other examples very quickly. Talk about, people want to know about guns and rifles. There's information on how they made bullets. This is all 1800s, this about the 1870s. Making maple syrup is in here. These are just some examples in the book. And then cooking with it, and you'll see in this book, you'll notice they didn't waste anything. That's a big theme through all of this, and how they reuse things. So just practical things that can be used and applied today are in these books. And in this chapter called Summertime, it just talks about how they would take a pig and use all parts of the pig. So I mean, or whatever other animal. There's just so much information in here. I'd suggest taking a look at these. Even homemade remedies for bee stings for one of her relatives. There's just so much information here. There's a couple more books. The series goes, which everybody's familiar with, Little House on the Prairie. There's information in there. The next one's on the banks of Plum Creek, shores of Silver Lake. This is as she gets older, Little Town on the Prairie. And there's one in particular called The Long Winter, which I'm going to point out. And the cover's missing. It's called These Happy Golden Years, and then one when she's married, called The First 4 Years. There's also one about her husband, Almanza Wilder, called Farmer Boy, and there's a lot of neat info in there as well. But I'm going to point to, in particular, The Long Winter. This was in the early 1880s in Dakota Territory when she and her family moved there, and it was a very hard winter, and it was 7 months of winter with like -40 temperatures. And what they did to survive, because basically the whole town pretty much almost near starved. It's a good example of people working together. These are actually based on true stories. If not, check it out on the internet. But I just want to show you, these books are full of pretty neat things and examples. One thing I just want to talk about, and this would be Sioux Indians. I'm not sure if it was Lakota or Nakota, but because they don't give exact group of people. But what was pretty neat is, if you kind of do your homework, you can, this story talks about how the native elder was saying that every 21st winter was the hardest winter, and every 7 years was a hard winter, but every 21st was the hardest. And if people have ever heard of anything called the Lakota counts, there's something on the Smithsonian website, I can put it in the sidebar, as to the recording of each winter, and it can actually line up with this information, so it's pretty neat. So that's based on a true story, where he came and told the settlers that it would be the 21st winter, and it'd be a very hard winter, and this whole book is about how they survived, basically. Something else, just some information, flipping through here. One chapter is called Where There's a Will, There's a Way. The stories in here are actually kind of amazing if you can read between the lines. What they talk about is there's basically the town's pretty much starving, and Laura's father, everybody knows him as Pa on TV, this is a real story. He went and got some seed wheat, but they didn't have a mill. So you know those old-fashioned coffee grinders with the black top and that can grind? They ground the wheat. Information right there, something you can use. So that's pretty neat. Also too, on page 196, 197, they talk a bit about, I'll put the cover out so you can see, they talk a bit about taking what they call a button lamp, taking a button piece of material around it, and taking oil, like from anywhere, axle oil, could be maybe even canola oil, and making a lamp out of that. There's just so much in here. There's also a chapter I advise people to read called Cold and Dark, where they just had months upon months of winter and just attitude of survival. So that's what I would, and people coming together. So that's what I'd suggest for people to take a look at. But these are just some examples. They talk about how they burned hay. They just what they did to survive. But I would encourage people just to take a look at these series, but in particular, The Long Winter, and you can start off with Little House in the Big Woods. Go to your library. It's there, all right under your nose. Take care. More to come later.